Welcome to Friday. Today we have Matthew Bird. Matthew is an absolutely wonderful artist, and he'll be going over his techniques, etc. He asked me prior to this that he'd love everybody watching, every single one of you, to ask him a question because he just really enjoys that. No, he's a wonderful artist. He's very open to answering questions. Matthew, wonderful to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me, John. It's great to be here.
And so with that, why don't we start with Matthew's artwork. Ethel, can you run that for us?
Sure. Let me just. Do we see this now? Okay, the PowerPoint is up. As always, we want our guests to, of course, follow our guest artist social media accounts. This is Matthew's Facebook account. This is his Instagram. And then this is his website. The next couple of slides will have sample artworks of Matthew, and he'll be delighted to share about each of these. Okay, so we'll begin with this one.
Yeah, so I just threw in here a few different images to kind of give people an idea of my work if you're not familiar. I primarily work either in a portrait, figure, or still life. Those are my two genres. And recently I've been doing sort of a beach series the past year or so with my girls. So this is my youngest daughter. I paint my kids a lot because they're convenient models, always available and around. So yeah, this is just her looking for seashells under the pier. It's called treasure hunting. Other figurative stuff I do. The next slide shows sort of a combination of figure and still life, actually, because it's just kind of a bonanza of flowers. This is the flower merchant, and I was really just drawn to this woman working in, well, near you, John, in Pike's Market, selling flowers and arranging them, and just very contemplative, arranging beauty. And I was just kind of watched her for a while, and the light was just really, really beautiful around her. And painting her fleece also was a fun challenge in this painting. But yeah, I love this. Lots of colors, lots of Daniel Smith quinacrinones in that painting.
Matthew,
next,
can I ask you about the previous painting? Is that the place where the sun sets just between the at that particular angle twice a year? Is that the spot? You know, in the scene, not this one, the previous one.
At the beach?
This one.
I don't know.
Ah, okay, sorry.
It's, I mean, this was like just after the sun went under the, it was about to go under the horizon, and it's kind of just lighting up the end of that pier there, which kind of had this cathedral glow to it, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
So these are all full sheet paintings, 22 by 30. This magnolia painting is one of my favorites. This one started with the mint julep cup. I was looking at condensation on silver and thought that would be a really hard thing to paint. This one started with the mint julep cup. I was looking at
Okay, it's clear now.
a lot of my paintings come out of just an interest in, wow, that looks hard to paint. I wonder if I can do it. And this kind of built around that, just adding in more and more stuff. So it was a lot of fun. What's the next painting? I forget. Oh yes, this is another one of my daughter. This was a big elephant sheet painting. So this was like 29 by 40. But I love the high contrast of her just sitting in the light of this sunlight and reading a book. It's called Once Upon a Time. And, just watching my kids when they get lost in their imagination, something I always come back to and try to explore in my paintings. I might have another one in here. I don't know. I've painted both my kids, just kind of lost in thought, which I don't know. It's something I really like. Another complex still life is I'm from Maryland, Baltimore, and we're known for our blue crabs and having crab feasts every summer. So this is kind of an ode to my hometown, but sort of a tour de force of different textures. Painting the galvanized metal and the spiky crabs and all that was a lot of fun. So as you can tell, I'm kind of a glutton for punishment and kind of enjoy the challenges of interesting textures.
Matthew, we have a question from Christine about the lady in the market. How did you produce the loose hairs in the flower merchant painting?
They were masked out, I believe. Just a few little flyaway hairs. And then when I removed the mask, I just went in and tightened things up. I rarely use white paint, so that was all liquid and mask.
Perfect.
Yeah. This one is Tidal Harvest. It's 16 by 20, so not a full sheet, but still tried to pack a lot into it, and especially loved painting the foam on the beer. This is one of the early paintings. I've done this a few times. Just painting beer foam is fun. I don't know why, but making it look realistic and frothy. And then these crusty oysters and barnacles and stuff. It's again a lot of interesting textures, but also throughout everything, it's not just about any one thing or texture. It's about bringing it all together and telling a story. So this one, and I think the one before it was another example of lots of different elements that come together to form a meal or a narrative, basically.
This is a brilliant work.
Thank you. So that's kind of an overview of the different kind of things I do.
Those are awesome. Okay, so would you like to start, Matthew?
Yeah, so today I thought, as I was saying before we came on, I'm not a fast painter. So trying to do something in an hour is always a challenge, but I will try to make it interesting. I'm going to do a little study of a couple oranges, and let me bring this up so you can see what I've already got started.
Matthew, how long does it normally take you to finish a painting?
Well, full sheet painting, it's at least a month, sometimes two. It's a lot of hours for the bigger paintings. And I can talk a little bit about my whole process, but here's a little still life study, and we'll see how far I can get.
And in the introduction, if you'd be willing to answer a question on Facebook from Sandra Ball asking, what is your favorite paper to use?
Sure. I'll briefly touch on my basics with materials. So paper, I use Fabriano cold press. And in this particular case, I'm working on a Raymar panel. So this has Fabriano on an ACM aluminum composite material, so it's nice and flat. I also will use Fabriano 300 pound if I'm not using a panel. For my brushes, I prefer a Skoda. Right now I'm using a Perla, which is a nice synthetic. I'm gonna just start by putting a first layer down on some of these markings on the side of this bowl and let that dry. I'll also use a Skoda Optima, which is more of a synthetic squirrel mop brush for larger wet washes. And of course, Daniel Smith paints. The best. So as you can see from, I've already got the background roughed in on this little study. I normally will paint my backgrounds first, which is a little unconventional. Traditionally, most watercolors finish with the darks, but I like to start with the dark just because it's the way my eye works, and I sort of the way I see the value, it just helps me painting these items when I already have the dark there. I find that if I had left this white and I painted this, got this orange to where I thought it looked right, and then I went in with the dark, I would have to go back and redo more on the orange because it wouldn't be dark enough. And I think that's just the way my eye works. Everyone sees things differently. But it helps me. I know my friend Lauren McCracken, he does his black at the end. We paint similar still life, but we do it very differently. The subjects might be similar, but the way we apply the paint is different. Because I like to get those darks in right away. And it also allows me to create this this gradation from the black to a blue. And I like, whether it's an orange or a lemon, I like having that pop of color back there sometimes just to give it a little visual interest. So
Matthew,
working right
we had
into
a
what?
question.
Yeah, shoot.
The question was, what kind of brush did you use to paint the background?
I use a hockey brush, which is just a real basic flat wash brush.
Thank you.
I would
And the
usually,
other question we had was, how did you transfer the image onto the panel?
This one is pencil. I don't use transfer paper or anything. Not that I'm against it, that's fine. I just don't use it that much. Just go right on with pencil, draw it right on. I did these markings here that I'm painting right now. I used the number 2 because I wanted to be able to see them. But normally I keep it very, very light, the pencil marks, so that they don't show through.
Matthew,
And
Geraldine,
I'll use,
you use the projector for those complicated images.
for the big complicated ones, I will, yeah. That saves a lot of time. The grid system also works, if you're familiar with that.
Which one?
As a way to drawing a grid, squares.
Yes.
That helps speed things up as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'll project it. I'll use any tool that can speed up my time.
Matthew, what colors did you use in your background? And how many layers did you put down?
So I did 3 layers. I did an underpainting of what was it? Phthalo blue, red shade. And then I have a custom black that I mix up. And I did a couple layers of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hiya, Matthew.
Yeah.
You do some great detailed work. Do you consider yourself an hyper-realist?
No, I wouldn't say hyper realist. Although I guess some might say that, but I don't particularly subscribe to any one school of realism, whether it's photorealism or hyperrealism, or I'm just a realistic painter.
Right. Within that painting technique, do you ever use loose techniques to build up that level of detail?
Do I use what to build up the details? Say that at the beginning.
Do you use looser techniques to actually
Looser.
build up those details?
Occasionally, but I would say as a rule, I'm pretty much a tight painter
Very tight.
all the
yeah.
time.
Right. Yeah. Which suits what you're doing.
If you go on, if you're on my website, you'll see some paintings where I do some looser backgrounds, but the figures, tighter.
Mm.
But generally, I've always liked detail ever since I was little.
Mhm.
I actually have a memory of being in elementary school and my art teacher telling me to loosen up and paint bigger. And I've gotten that my whole life, all through high school and college, and people telling me to loosen up, do things bigger. And I'm just saying no.
Well, you have
I've
painted
tried.
bigger.
What's that?
Matthew,
I've painted
Matthew.
bigger.
Hi, Matthew. This is Rajat here from India. May I ask you a question?
Yes.
So, while doing the background, do you use the spray gun also?
Do I use a what?
Spray gun.
Spray gun.
No, it's a brush. I use this
With a
brush.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Matthew, do you ever paint plein air?
Yes. But I'm not very good at it, so I don't really show people.
Are you using what's called a dry brush technique all the time or just part of the time?
Right now, this is all wet onto dry.
Okay, yeah.
No, this isn't dry.
How about your bigger objects like an orange or something like that?
Well, yeah, I might do a little dry brush at the end of the orange. Let's, I'm going to switch to a number 10. Let's go to Ultimo brush here. And this is going to be a new gamboge. I use this as an underpainting on this orange here.
Matthew, is that a porcelain palette?
Yes, it is. I like porcelain because it cleans up so nicely and it doesn't stain. If you're an artist who uses any of the phthalo colors, you'll know how they can really stain plastic palettes. And that doesn't happen with porcelain, so
And
I'm a fan.
Is that a Cheap Joe's one?
Gosh, I don't remember where I got it. Probably says
Nice.
on the bottom, but
Which yellow are you using now?
You can
it's
vote.
Nugan. And I'm gonna add in a little Daniel Smith quinacridone burnt orange, which is one of my favorites. I use this pigment a lot for skin tones in my portraits.
Matthew, I notice you leave a little white line around the orange. Is that to make it darker when you paint the orange?
It's because I don't want to reactivate that dark color too soon. I can pretty much run up against that side once or twice, but I don't want to keep going over it with my brush because it'll start to bleed. So I just left a little edge there so I can come back in with the orange and start working it.
Lovely. That's a good tip.
Very good tip.
Do you have fruit trees?
No. Cherry tree, but it doesn't have any fruit. Just flowers.
What do
I
you
don't know if
do
that
when
counts.
what do you do when there's a fruit or vegetable that's not in season?
Buy it at the supermarket.
Uh,
There is everything.
paint something else. I only paint real stuff. Like I've never painted fake flowers or plastic fruit. I think that's fine for some people, but when you're working at a level of detail that I like, as a realist, it needs to be real. So unless I wanted something to look like fake fruit, I go for the real thing. And if it's not in season, I'll have to wait. And I'll have ideas, kind of on the shelf in my head for a while, if need be. I want to do some more pomegranate stuff, but I got to wait till I can get them.
Only a few more weeks, then pomegranates will be in season.
Good.
You ever get people asking you if you use salt or alcohols in these fruits?
I don't use alcohol too much. Salt I will occasionally use to give some texture. Not in fruit though, too much. I don't know that I ever use salt when painting fruit, maybe.
We have a question on Facebook from Kristen Clark asking if you make preparatory sketches.
The right answer would be yes. All real artists do lots of studies and preparatory sketching. And one day I might be a real artist. But no, I do not do that. Occasionally I will. I'll try out new pigments, or if it's a particularly challenging, I'll do a study beforehand. I mentioned the beach series that I've been working on, and when I started doing that, I'd never painted waves before, and so that was a case where I did a study painting, just if I could do waves, but usually I think I'm just too eager to get into the painting, and I don't do a whole lot of practicing. I just dive in and hope
What
for
are
the
the two
best.
What are the two colors that you just added?
Burnt sienna and pyrrole orange.
Thank you.
This is I guess you can't see that so well in my camera there. This one's here is this is pyrrole.
Hello, Matthew. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, this is Fawzia from Bangladesh, and I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you.
You said it very right. The quinacridone burnt orange is one of the finest pigment I've ever come across.
Yes, I love it. I also like this, what I just put down is the quinacridone burnt scarlet,
Uh-huh.
which is another one that I really like.
So the image you're working on right now, that orange is still quite wet. So you live in a wettish type environment rather than having to suffer with dryness all the time?
Well, for this first stage, yes, I'm working wet into wet, but it's rapidly drying, and I'm starting to get some texture. So whoever asked about dry brush, it's this kind of thing in here.
Okay.
Where I can get a little texture thrown in. But yeah, I'm not gonna mess with it too much more. I'll let that first wash dry completely, and then we'll come in and build it up even more.
Matthew, do you use any pyrroles or perylines?
I use pyrrole orange. I think that's the only pyrrole I currently have on my palette. Let's see.
Is it
gonna get into
transparent
some-
pyrrole or regular pyrrole orange?
Transparent. Yeah, sorry.
No worries.
This is Payne's gray.
Matthew, do you take pictures of your still life and then paint off the photograph, or are you looking at your still life?
Usually I take pictures.
Okay, thank you.
Matthew,
And do you ever add or remove elements from your composition?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So actually, I should swing back to what John had mentioned earlier, as far as how long it takes to do a paint. A lot of people don't realize just the upfront work that goes into building a setup. It's hours, days of just figuring out what I'm going to paint, finding the items, the right bowls, the right background, the right utensils, fabric, whatever it is. It's all got to work, and it takes a long time to do. Just to find all that stuff and then to compose it. And then once I'm, starting to get happy with how it looks, then I'll start get the camera out and I'll start working with the lighting, the different angles of the camera, how everything fits. And it's a real process. I mean, there's a lot that goes in before anything, any paint ever gets mixed up.
Matthew, do you have a favorite artist, someone you admire?
I have lots of artists I admire. For figure and portrait stuff, I was really influenced by an artist named Bouguereau. He was a French classical painter around the time of the Impressionists were getting going. But he painted a traditional, just beautiful classical figures and portraits in oil. He's an oil painter, of course, but I just thought he was amazing when I discovered him. And he was not in my art history book. And I found him went to school in New York City, and I saw him at the Met. I was like, who is this guy? How come I've never heard of him? And I went back and I looked at my art textbook, and he wasn't in there. It's like he got forgotten. But he was a master during his time, very well renowned.
Would you mind spelling that name, please?
It's Bouguereau. And I say Bouguereau. That might not even be right, but
Thank you.
William. My first name is William.
Matthew, we had a Facebook question. There was Elizabeth Gunter asked, do you ever use a polarized filter to shoot your setup?
No, I use polarized filters, but not for still life shooting.
Do you shoot stuff with just your phone?
No. Although you could. I mean, phone cameras are pretty remarkable at this point.
What do you use for photographing?
I have a Canon 5D Mark III. It's an older digital SLR, but still does the job. So I haven't upgraded. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
So is that photographing the still life or photographing your art?
Both.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew, oops, sorry.
Thank you. Matthew, you mentioned how hard it is to paint something like the Magnolia, and yet that painting you did was amazing. So beautiful. How did you deal with that, with the time you spend on a painting?
Well, that's where photography really benefits the realist painter, because Magnolia blooms do not last long. Once you cut them, they brown really fast. So getting as much of the setup, figured out ahead of time helps. And then just knowing that it's gonna go, you got to work quickly. Just got to piece it together.
You actually painted some of the beauty of that fade, though. That's one of my very favorite flowers. So I break them off from the neighbors' trees.
Yeah.
Very naughty.
No, I've asked permission.
Okay, Matthew, what are the pigments you use in your made black? Your darkest darks.
Prussian blue, permanent alizarin crimson, mineral violet, and usually a little bit of quinburnt orange or quinacridone gold,
Okay,
something to sort of neutralize it.
sure.
So John, and people in America, the postage, parcel postage is going up October the 2nd, just in time for Christmas, and will stay up until the first week in January. So if you're thinking of ordering something, brushes or paper or paint or something, do it in September so you get a cheaper rate.
It's a good tip.
Thank you for that.
Matthew,
Yes.
when we look back in history at some of the older watercolor artists, such as Albrecht Dürer,
Yep.
he had a very detailed way of painting. Do you think that's because prior to watercolor becoming a prominent painting thing, they used to do egg tempera that forces you to be very detailed?
That's a good hypothesis.
What do you think to Albrecht Dürer's work?
I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I love his work.
I love
Yeah.
that air. That air, what it did. I mean, how did he get that back then? What were it, 13th century? I don't know.
I don't know. It was.
But how he
I don't
got
remember the
that
exact
level of detail is beyond me.
Yeah, no, he was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
So on the interview blog, it was a question about music, and you said that currently you like spending more time listening to podcasts and books on audio. Is there a book that you're currently listening to that you want to tell us about?
I'm in between books right now. The one I just finished was well, it was more of summer reading for fun. It was a fiction book that new they just did it on Amazon, The Terminal List. That show. I read that book. That's not my normal reading. That was more vacation reading. I don't know. I've listened to the McCullough biography on Da Vinci. I really liked. That's been out for a while. I love history. Some other good ones.
Matthew?
Yeah.
What's it like painting on a full elephant? That's a term that you don't hear very often these days.
It's hard. It's when you start painting really, really large, a lot of things change. You need bigger brushes, obviously, but
was that watercolor paper?
Yes, it's Fabriano.
Wow, that's a massive sheet.
Matthew, how do you?
Sorry, go on.
Go ahead. You finished.
I'm done. Yeah, go on.
Okay, I was curious, how do you keep your colors from getting muddy?
So I talk about this a little bit in my workshops because I'm not always sure what people mean when they say that. Because the color is just the color. And if you're painting mud, then you want it to look like mud. But if you're talking about like sort of sometimes when you overwork the paper, it doesn't really matter what the color is, it can start to look quote unquote muddy. And sometimes, yeah, there's pigments don't really play nicely together. And that can create an effect that's not very pleasing. I wonder whether sometimes people say muddy just because they're not sure how to describe this, the effect they're seeing that they don't like. It's just something negative and it just looks not what they want. So they say muddy.
Yeah, I guess it's a combination of overwork and dull. By layering too much, or like you said, the wrong combination of colors, it loses its freshness, especially with something animate.
Right. So if we're talking about freshness or looking dull, I use mostly all transparent or semi-transparent colors. Introducing certain opaque pigments, you know, if I was to get like an oxide of chromium or something, that's going to have more of a chalkiness to it, which if you don't know what you're doing or you're not expecting that, it's not going to mix the way you want. And it might give a muddy appearance or a dull look if you're not expecting it. You might say, oh, that looks muddy.
I've got one.
Just really what pigments you're using is really important, and getting to know like the Daniel Smith color chart and knowing, you know, all right, this is opaque and this is a staining pigment or this granulates this way. All of that is really important to understand when you start mixing the colors together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I've got a question for you. When you have such a beautiful background, what happens when you sneeze and you mess something up? How do you fix it? Or do you just throw the whole thing away?
Oh no.
Mr. Clean comes to help.
Yeah, you try to fix it.
But how can you
Like that,
how can you fix
back
that
your brush.
beautiful surface?
Use anti.
You can. So right there, I dropped my brush. Got a big old water dot there, and so I can come back in and touch it up. The background, yeah, I will usually cover that with a sheet of paper or something so that it doesn't get marred up.
So it's exposed just for us right now.
Just for you, you can see the whole thing as I risk it all for your enjoyment.
I thought you were a little cavalier there, and I'm thinking of the double elephant, you know?
I have a still ed class on my website where I do an entire painting, like a full sheet, start to finish. And I talk about how I do the black background and how I cover it up so that it doesn't get messed up. Because that is definitely the downside of doing the black first. You don't want anything to go wrong.
Matthew,
Yeah.
While you're going through the process of painting, do you constantly ask yourself what level of detail that particular area of the painting needs? And do you have to stop yourself and say,
Yes.
right, that's it, that's it?
Yes. It's always reevaluating and pushing things further and further, seeing what I've missed. It's oftentimes a matter of value. Getting the values right is so important. I rarely have to tell a student that they've gone too dark. I'm always telling people, go darker, push it darker, put your values darker.
Is that part of
we've
the
all
question of when you've finished? People are always asking, how do you know when you've finished?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I get that. It's people always want to know that. I don't know what that question's about. Like, it's finished when it's finished.
Yeah.
I'll paint it till I'm pretty satisfied. Usually on a big full sheet painting, I will work very meticulously at one piece at a time, and I'll bring whatever item I'm painting, I'll paint that almost till it's done, and then I'll move on to something else. And when I get everything covered, I'll go back through and tweak values and make adjustments. And when I think it's finished, I'll put it away in a drawer and come back to it, in a couple days, couple weeks with fresh eyes. And I'll almost always see stuff that needs to be fixed, because when you're next to something for so long, it's easy to overlook things.
Oh, yes. Hello, Matthew.
Yes.
It's Agnes from Belgium, you remember?
Of course. How are you, Agnes?
Well, speaking of practicing, I'm just doing what we have done in the workshop in England again. So I'm halfway. I'll let you know when it's finished.
Good for you. Yeah. Agnes was in my workshop in England, and I often tell people that the workshops don't really start till you get back to your own studio and put all the techniques into practice and start figuring out what works with your style and what you like and don't like.
My husband asks, oh, he's not doing peers this time.
I'm done with pairs.
Matthew,
Yes.
since you work in such detail, do you ever use the method of standing back from your painting quite a bit, or not really with your realistic style?
No, all the time. Usually at the end of the day, I will stand back, put it on the easel, and like my wife will have something on TV, or I'll be sitting there and I'm not actually watching the TV. I'm looking over at my painting, and she'll catch me, and she'll be like, "You're painting in your head, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yes." I paint in my head. I plan out. I think about what I'm going to do, what needs to be fixed. I kind of evaluate it from a distance, and plan the next day's work.
But during the process also, you stand back quite a bit, or just afterwards?
Probably more at the end of a work session. But yeah, if I need to stand back and look, I will.
Matthew, do you start another painting, or you finish the one you already started and then go to the next one?
I almost always finish what I start before moving on. I have a number of friends that can, more than one painting at a time, but I've always been much better just doing one and then, finishing it before I
That's
get
very
tired of it.
disciplined. Matthew, that's very disciplined, right? To finish one.
Right.
Well, good. Yes, there you go.
Yeah, and it's partly just knowing myself, if I get distracted and get interested in something else, I might not ever come back to it. So it's,
yeah.
I'm very practical. I mean, this is a business. If I start something, I've got hours invested into it. That's time and money, and I don't want to, I don't want to lose that. So I almost always will finish.
One job at a time.
I'm sorry?
Matthew,
Says
how many?
one.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, carry on.
I was curious how many workshops a year you teach and what's the proportion of US versus international?
Well, COVID really screwed all that up. I'm just past couple months been starting to schedule stuff in 2023. I'll usually do I don't do that many international, at least one a year, but mostly domestic. And even those, not too much, not like I used to. With my kids and stuff, it's hard to get away, but I'll do, I don't know, half a dozen to 10 maybe a year, local.
Do you ever give up on a painting?
Say that again?
Do you ever give up on a painting? Do you have unfinished paintings?
I have some, yeah.
Just going to be true confessions.
Matthew,
Oh, sorry, Ann.
do you, with the style of painting that you do, with detailed areas, specific areas, is it in any way appropriate to link values within the painting, or does it matter in this kind of style?
Can you elaborate on what you mean by link values?
Well, generally, watercolor paintings come together because values are all interconnected. Do you know what I mean in that way? The flow into one another, the colors.
Right. Well, with my style, they don't flow into each other unless I want them to.
Yeah. So you do.
I mean, I'm keeping everything very contained. But value-wise, I'll try to have everything uniform in value in the proper value. Otherwise, it's not going to look real.
Yeah, it looks very targeted.
Right.
Yeah, and that's how we get that accuracy. Is that a technique deliberately done to help you with your detail? Is that something you?
I don't know how deliberate it was as much as probably just more of an instinct.
Yeah.
Matthew?
Sorry. Go on.
Yeah.
As a juror, what's the difference in a good painting versus a great painting, in your opinion?
A great painting will usually speak to me on a level that goes beyond just technique, or that's a cool subject, or that's a that executed it really well. People can be really good at painting technique, but it's not an interesting painting. It's not something that's gonna like make me stop and really linger. It really captures my attention. It doesn't matter, what the style is, if it's got that little something extra that you can tell the artist is really communicating something special. That's usually one thing that at least that separates a great painting from one that's just,
Matthew, sorry.
Go ahead.
What made you choose watercolor painting as a medium?
That's a good question. I mean, in art school, we did oil and acrylic. It wasn't until I was on my own for a while doing illustration that I got into watercolor. And I think it was playing with the wet into wet properties of watercolor that really kind of caught my imagination, and the way they bleed on the page and can be uncontrollable, really. To a lot of degree, a lot of what I do is not necessarily intuitive for watercolor, because I'm really controlling it depends what it wants to do, and that's a whole nother thing. But I kind of fell in love with the way the pigments move on the paper and mix together, and it's really just a lovely medium. And the transparency is probably the other thing that I love about it, the way it can glow.
I agree completely.
So you're a Andrew Wyeth fan?
Oh yeah.
And are you acquainted with Irina Roman?
Yes.
Oh my God. She's amazing.
Yes. Yes, she's incredibly talented.
Matthew?
Really good contrast and those lights and darks that I love. She's mastered that.
Matthew, you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
hi.
go ahead.
Hi, I noticed how you move around the canvas on your subject matter. Like you started with the bowl and then you went to the orange on the right-hand side. And are you going, back and forth to the different items because you're waiting for different layers to dry and then you want, or is it just because you're restating what you already did as far as how moving around?
Normally I don't paint like this. This is just for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's to let it dry so that I can just keep doing something while we're chatting here. This would take me a lot. I'm rushing through it to try and keep things happening. But it depends on the paper, what's wet, what's dry.
I see.
It looks good for rushing.
Can you talk to us a little bit? Can you talk to us a little bit about what you do with masking?
Sure. So I will, in this case, or in many of my still lifes, when I do the background first, so I'll mask out the central elements, and I pretty much create the environment that they're sitting in before I go back and paint them. And so I'll use tape to block out the big areas, and then liquid mask to paint around the edges, just because I don't like to waste a lot of masking fluid. So that's kind of a shortcut that I use. And I've got a whole spiel on masking fluid in my online class. There's so many different kinds and so many different approaches to masking fluid. Whether you're using the fluid that dries clear or the fluid that's got a little tint to it so you can see it when it dries. There's pros and cons to each. I generally like the fluid that has a little bit of a tint to it, so you can do that by adding a little watercolor to your fluid so you can see it when it dries, or you can buy the kind that's already got a little bluish color to it.
Do you demo every day at your workshops?
No. If I do a workshop, I always demo, but I don't do workshops that often.
I've got a new mental health question that I want to ask people who come on nowadays. And it's, do you ever suffer from burnout?
Burnout, yeah.
What do you feel is the remedy for it?
A change of pace, change of scenery. There's burnout, and then there's the kind of the proverbial writer's block or creative slump where I don't get inspired or I'm having trouble thinking of new stuff to do. So that's different than burnout. Burnout, it's usually when there's just I've taken on too many things, going too fast, too hard, and because it's not all painting, you know. There's all the other parts of the business you got to worry about.
Life generally around you if you're taking on too much.
Yep.
So Matthew, we're at the end of the hour. I wanted to really thank you. It's been wonderful watching you today. And I forgot to say this when we started, but Dennis Smith is extremely grateful having Matthew as a brand ambassador.
Yeah.
Fascinating to watch him paint.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Matthew.
Hopefully that was
Is that a play guitar in the background?
That was fantastic.
You look like a fast painter to me.
Yeah.
Matthew,
It was truly wonderful.
You're a fast artist. It's just that the intensity
is a
of the
master
work
artist.
you do is a lot longer. You're a very fast artist.
I appreciate you saying that. It's always a little nerve-wracking for me. If you want to see the longer paintings, but I have them on my website. If you want to take a workshop where it's like a 12-hour full sheet painting, so it's a different experience, but this is always fun.
Well, thank you for taking us through it. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Matthew.
It was
again,
wonderful.
John.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Matthew.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.